Welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We are glad you are here. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good afternoon. On board.
I guess it is afternoon. Sorry, folks. Come on, it's like 12:00 whatever.
For our guest, it's still morning. On board for this episode is Stephen Schladover, research engineer at UC Berkeley's California Partners for Advanced Transportation Technology program. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and good morning. Yes, it's still morning here in California.
Yes, it's great having you, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
Well, Steve, let's give the audience a sense to start with on the types of issues you're primarily focused on today, the key problems that you see that need solving.
Yeah, I work on a variety of different things. Some things relatively near-term driver assistance systems like truck platooning, but then also give a lot of attention to some of the longer-term issues associated with automated driving. Some of the work I do is helping the state of California with the implementation of their regulations for testing and public operation of automated driving systems. And I also work on a variety of standards issues for driving automation, both domestic and international. And from my perspective, I think the key challenge that we all face within this industry is how are we going to ensure the safety of these automated driving systems, especially when we get to the higher levels of automation, when you don't have a human overseeing the system continuously, but now the safety of the system depends entirely on the technology. That's the big challenge. And associated with that is, how do we get to the point that we can actually display a convincing enough body of evidence to convince the public and to convince the regulators that the systems really are as safe as they're claimed to be?
Yeah,
Steve, you and Alan, I was going to say, go way back on this.
Yeah, we go back, but I'd like to jump in and first of all, thank you, Steve, for all the work that you have done and you did do for the state of California and putting together their efforts in this. I mean, you were absolutely instrumental there. They've been the leaders since the beginning, and it's really basically a roadmap, if we can call it, for other states to do and to follow. So thank you for that. And of course, I agree with you. Those are the big enchiladas out there.
Yeah, and I think our big challenge now is actually getting some regulatory action at the national level, because it really has to fit within a national framework. It can't be each individual state trying to fill the gaps.
Right, and maybe it's up to this point, it's been California behaving as Washington and leading the way out there and doing it, and kudos to you and everybody else in California for doing that.
Tell us a little more about the kinds of regulation that you would like to see coming out of Washington. What should they be doing from your perspective?
Well, they actually have a big challenge because of the immaturity of the technology right now. And I think the regulations are going to have to be developed in a staged fashion, meaning that the first set of regulations are not going to be the final regulations. I often hear people talking about wanting to be able to have the equivalent of a driver licensing exam for the automated vehicle. So, here's the test, and the vehicle passes the test, it's safe enough. That won't work. That's just not a technically viable approach at the current state of knowledge.
We know that doesn't even work for 16-year-olds, right? Because as soon as they do that, what do, they have a crash doing a K-turn after they get there. Never mind. At least maybe that was only my daughters that went through it that way, and I went through it that way. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. And they have the benefit of human brains that are still far more sophisticated than even the best computers. But I think the way the regulatory process is going to have to start is with the engineering processes that the developers follow. So and there are some standards that have already been written at the international level ISO has a couple of standards, and the Underwriters Laboratory has a standard UL 4600 on the processes for creating a safety case. And I think it would be useful to have regulations that at least require the developers of the system to show that they have followed a thorough process of assessing all of the potential hazards and of mitigating those hazards. And that's pretty much what the UL 4600 standard provides. It's like a roadmap for the developer to say, here's the checklist of the things you need to do, and make sure you looked at this, make sure you looked at that, and that you did something to try to mitigate those risks. And I think if we at least started with some regulations that require people to follow those processes, and if they don't, to document the justifications for not having followed the processes, then we can get to a stage of saying, okay, these guys did a reasonable job of putting the system together. We can't possibly test it under all of the different hazard conditions it's going to encounter, but at least they've done a solid job of engineering the system so that it can handle the kind of situations it's likely to encounter out on the road.
Well, I think, Steve, to me, that maybe that's about what you're going to say. That's how you begin, and that's how you get to go out there in the beginning. But I think that just lets you go out there with an attendant on board for you name it, an amount of time, so that in fact you go and actually. I still like disengagement reports. Nobody else seems to like disengagement reports. I think disengagement reports are really great if in fact they're real and people don't fake them and cheat and whatever, and they're within the operational design domain that you're going to operate as a business. So go, Steve. I interrupted. I shouldn't have jumped in there. Yeah, go ahead.
I also like disengagement reports, but the way they've been implemented so far is very, very inconsistent. And we've got some companies that have done a conscientious job of reporting the causes of the disengagement. We got others who've been totally uninformative about the disengagement reports. So we're trying to, I guess I would say, upgrade the disengagement reporting process so that there actually would be more consistency across the different companies, and that they'd be required to report not just what happened, but why it happened. And the important part of the disengagement reports is what was the reason that the driver had to intervene, not just some of them report unwanted maneuver. I mean, unwanted maneuver is sort of a useless description of a disengagement cause, but what caused the unwanted maneuver? Why did the vehicle misbehave in that particular situation? And then what did you do to solve that problem so it doesn't happen again? So yes, the idea that
to me in those situations, Steve, it's we don't know what we don't know.
Well, but if the developer doesn't know, that's a really big problem. The developer needs to find out, and if they've left a disengagement cause unresolved, they're not doing their job. And I think the conscientious ones are doing that work. Yeah, so that then they understand why did it misbehave and what do we have to do to fix the cause of that disengagement. So or you take it out of your operational design domain. There may be times in which so fine, take it out. Okay, but then if the vehicle encounters a situation that's outside its operational design domain, it needs to be designed to recognize that situation and then turn itself off and turn the control back to the driver, or to park the vehicle if it doesn't have a driver on board. That's sort of a fundamental, very bare minimum requirement that if it's gone outside the operational design domain, don't continue to operate. And I think we agree that the process approach to regulations is just the first step. That's to get us going. And then as more and more knowledge is built up about what the technical requirements are, we can start having some regulations that are based on meeting certain performance targets. But that's going to take years to develop, and it's going to take years to develop the collection of situations that need to be used to evaluate the performance of the systems to determine whether they're safe enough. But we're going to have something to do before that. I also point out one of the key elements in the California regulations for testing is proper training of the test drivers. Because when you're doing testing on public roads, the way you protect the public is by having a well-qualified driver who can intervene and override the system when it does something wrong. And that's why, for example, the Arizona Uber crash could not have happened in California, because the driver who wasn't monitoring the system properly would not have qualified as a test driver in California. She had a bad driving record, and that driving record would have disqualified her from being a test driver in California. So we pay a lot of attention to the qualifications of the test drivers and making sure that they've also gone through a proper training program. The manufacturers need to put in place a training program, including both classroom training and on-the-road training, to verify the capabilities of the drivers before they're allowed to drive the vehicles.
I think, Steve, not only for that's fine for tests, but at some point you need to make a business out of this. And of course, there are the two businesses that are associated with driverless. One, they sell one to me. Again, I'm sort of the opinion where you've been about maybe all of this, that'll never happen, but whatever, because I'm too irresponsible. I'm just, who's going to, but if you might go in there and run a business, have a fleet, but having the attendants in the beginning, not only to oversee the technology, but to let the customer be comfortable. This isn't a circus sideshow or a freak show or a Disneyland ride. You're just trying to get someplace. And, the customer, how are you going to deal with a customer? Go ahead, Steve.
No, and that's exactly what Waymo and Cruise are doing in San Francisco right now. They've got the permits to do that. They're carrying passengers, and they're working out the kinks in their passenger handling systems, in their ride-hailing apps, and all the rest of those peripherals associated with it. Now, the other business case that's really coming along is the package delivery. And that's a case where you've got special purpose vehicles that don't even have a driver's position in them. So that's a little bit trickier. And then those rely on remote supervision, where you've got somebody back at the control center who's watching over the vehicles. And when they're first getting out there, it's probably one-to-one. It's probably one remote supervisor per vehicle. They're not driving the vehicle, but they're watching everything that's going on, and they can intervene at any point to shut it down and cause it to stop. So that's another low-speed urban application that's getting a lot of attention right now.
Yeah, but don't you have that in your California regulations, that there is an oversight over even whether you're carrying people or passengers? There's a remote oversight to the operation. I thought you had that within the California regs. Now,
the regs require a two-way communication link between the vehicle and the remote person. But unfortunately, the regs don't say anything about what that remote person needs to do. So that actually depends on the implementation, which is when the company applies to do this kind of operation, they need to explain, okay, what is that remote person actually doing? What authority do they have? But it's not formally stated in the regulations.
Yeah, but you would think that somebody, as I too flippantly suggest that, these things are businesses, and basically, you're out there betting the ranch every time you put one of these things out there. And we, of course, saw what happened to Uber's efforts in this area with the one crash, unfortunate crash they had in Arizona. You have to be responsible. At least the CEO has to be responsible of the whole darn thing, doesn't she?
Yes, and that's where there's a wide variation across the different companies. Remember, we've got 60 plus companies that are permitted to test here on the road in California. A lot of them are household names, and most of those are quite responsible, but then some of those are little startups that none of us have ever heard of. And those are the ones you have to watch out for because who knows whether they've ever done anything like this before or all their prior experiences in social media or other or mobile phone apps or other things like that that don't have safety consequences.
Or competing with Android, which is one of the ones that are going public now. I mean, you say to yourself, I mean, okay, never mind, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
um,
Well, yeah, there's a lot of risk out there. We need the regulations out there for the ones who are not responsible. Typically, it's not going to make that much of a difference in the behavior of the ones who are already behaving responsibly.
Steve, you've been critical of Tesla's decision to rely exclusively on cameras for
Yeah.
automated driver assistance. You want to get into that a bit for us?
Yes. I believe it's going to be necessary to have multiple sensor implementations in order to get to higher levels of automation. If you're just doing driver assistance and you've got a driver there who's fully engaged in the driving task, cameras are fine. But if you're going to get to the point where the system is doing the entire dynamic driving task and is taking full responsibility for the safety of the system, camera alone is not adequate. You're going to have cameras plus radars plus lidars plus precise positioning and very detailed digital mapping. And when we get to high levels of market penetration, you're going to have V2X communication as well. Now, each of the sensor technologies has its advantages and its disadvantages. And the reason you need multiple sensors is you've got to have some with advantages that compensate for the disadvantages of the other ones. Now, cameras have several really big disadvantages. One, they can't see under bad atmospheric conditions, heavy rain, heavy snow, smoke, dust, fog. It doesn't matter. You put 10 cameras on facing the same way. If you've got bad visibility, they're not going to see through it. Another disadvantage is cameras just create images. They don't give you any direct measurement of the distances to objects. They don't give you any measurements of the speed of those objects or the relative speed of those objects. Other technologies like radar and LiDAR can actually give you a direct measurement of the distance to the object and of the relative speed of that object compared to your object. They don't get tricked by things like bad sun angles. You can be driving straight into the sun and you're still going to get good measurements, which you're not going to get from a camera that's blinded by the sun that's facing straight at your camera. So you need to have these different technologies that are not susceptible to the same kind of environmental disturbances. They're going to have to complement each other, and then you do sensor fusion to combine the data you get from the different sensors. Any well-designed sensor system is going to include not only its measurement of the target, but its level of confidence in that measurement of the target. And when you do sensor fusion, you combine them so that the ones that have high certainty get weighted more heavily. The ones that have low certainty or higher uncertainty get weighted less. And that way you get your maximum confidence estimate of, okay, what is the target environment I'm dealing with? That's the way you can sort of maximize the safety of the systems when you're trying to put them out on the road. So I really believe that the all-camera approach is a dead end in terms of trying to get to a higher level of automation. Now, I don't know whether Tesla has given up on the high levels of automation consciously or whether they've given up on it unconsciously. But with that decision, that says to me they're never going to get to automation at the level that they can have the system drive without driver supervision.
So, Steve, since we're doing discussion here, and this is, of course, discussion. If I had the answers, I'd be a rich guy. So, but I don't have the answers. But I guess kind of the way I've sort of argued it a little bit differently than you. Given that we're still at the early stages of some of this stuff, all of it. I might choose a decision to modify the operational design domain such that I can get away with as few different sensors as I can, and maybe even deal with an operational design domain that is really only with cameras. This business about driving in fog and driving in deep snow and solving the asymptote of the operation design domain, I think, is just silly. I think, I'd rather see us developing something that does the 80%, does the, let's call it, easier stuff. You know where the sun is, where you are, the way you're oriented, whether or not you're going to be facing into the sun. I mean, even in the DARPA challenge, we had a loop in our algorithm that if we were driving into the sun, we would start zigzagging, to be able to pick up, and because we were only vision. And in a sense, there are some of the, I know that that's an extreme on one hand and whatever, but yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have the precise mappings. But boy, I mean, what you're worried about are the stuff that's moving in the environment, and all your horsepower is associated with dealing with things that are moving. And if you can do a half decent job with those things, you should be able to deal with the stationary things that are in the precise map database. So, yeah, if the data is free and you've been there a gazillion times and you've accumulated it, great. But boy, that doesn't help you dealing with the moving stuff, which is the really tough piece. That's I know it's a discussion. It's a discussion partially, and we're having a discussion here. So yeah, go ahead.
But the map does help you deal with the moving stuff, because it tells you exactly what you can subtract that's not moving. Yeah. And then you can focus the rest of your attention on what's different from what's in that detailed map. Yeah. And that's actually one of the main advantages of having that detailed map, by knowing which of the things that are not on the map, and now those are the things that could hit you.
Yeah.
But of course, if we look at the restricted operational design domains, we'll go back to Morgantown, and which I both have in our history. There you've got the restricted operational design domain, and the challenge is, how do you now expand the operational design domain outside the fixed guideway to cover enough useful places that you actually have a viable service?
Absolutely. And you bring out Morgantown. I think we deserve to give it some kudos. What is it? 45 plus years, 46 years that they've been operating out there. Essentially, I mean, can anything be safer than that? So yeah, and completely automated, driverless, blah, 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 and all the others, minor communications back to headquarters, I mean, but the operational design domain is like teeny tiny.
Right. And the big challenge now is expanding that operational design domain.
Absolutely.
In a way that provides a viable service. And
that gives you a business, lets you be in business, right?
Right. Yeah. But how do you do that, considering all of the unpredictable stuff you're still going to encounter, even in a relatively confined area? And take, say, emergency vehicles, or police officers directing traffic. The things that, because the power went down and the traffic signals are down there, you don't have traffic signals. So an officer's out there directing traffic. What do you do? Sudden rainstorm. And now, so you just halt the service. Is that now a viable commercial service if you can't operate it when it starts raining? And maybe it is in Chandler, Arizona, where it hardly ever rains. But if you go
Trenton,
someplace,
New Jersey, where we got completely white, but there's nobody. I mean, we barely could drive down here 2 nights ago because, hey, Route 1's closed.
yeah,
295 is closed. I mean,
right,
not
right.
even
So,
us gray humans could even, the operational design domain went, go ahead.
right. Well, so you can't expect any automated vehicle to operate.
Absolutely not. I mean, no, I mean, hey, stay home.
Yeah, that's right. But you still have to look at the realistic cases that you're going to have to
Yeah.
serve in order to have sort of a minimum viable business.
Yeah.
Um, and I think vision is still going to be hard to get to work through any reasonable minimum operational design. I mean, I use the example here in the Bay Area. Everybody who drives across the Bay Bridge knows that when you're driving from Oakland towards San Francisco, you got to go through a big toll plaza. The toll plaza has metering lights so that they can regulate the flow onto the bridge. At certain times of the year, usually right around the equinoxes, the fall and the spring equinox, the setting sun is right behind those traffic signals. And no matter what you do, you cannot see those traffic signal heads when the sun is setting right behind them. That's a case where it doesn't matter how good a camera you've got, it's going to be blinded by that setting sun right behind the traffic signals.
Yeah, the bus drivers on the exclusive bus lane leading to the Lincoln Tunnel from Jersey to New York, there's a helix in the morning. Guess where the sun's coming up? Right. Every one of those buses, the flow just basically almost stops for a few minutes there, because at one point on the helix, irrespective of the day, as long as the sun's shining, boy, you can't see.
Right. So, and those are examples where you need other technologies that are not going to be impacted by that particular phenomenon.
Right.
What kinds of progress, Steve, have you seen in the development of automatic emergency braking that we so often talk about here?
Well, and this is where I think we have to be clear about what automatic emergency braking really is. I think, I mean, I've been reading Alan's postings on this for a while, and I think what Alan is talking about is a comprehensive collision avoidance system. And that's not what automatic emergency braking is. Automatic emergency braking is a very basic system. It's like the first step towards collision avoidance, and it's designed so that at the very last instant, if you've got an imminent crash, it's going to try to mitigate the severity of the crash. It isn't really designed to handle every possible crash scenario, because doing the comprehensive collision avoidance is hugely challenging technically. There's so many different things that have to be considered in dealing with that. And I've gotten exposed to this through some of the work on the international standards committees that I've done, where we've written some of the standards for these collision avoidance braking systems. And in fact, the very first thing we came up with is a lot of the companies that are most advanced in this say, don't call it collision avoidance because we can't guarantee collision avoidance. So we call it collision mitigation braking system that's going to get rid of some of that kinetic energy so that if you crash at a lower impact speed. Because it's still too hard to be able to detect all of those possible threats and know when to apply the brakes and when to not apply the brakes to avoid them. But when you get to the point that you've got a very high confidence, if I don't do something, the crash is going to happen, then we put on the brakes and try to get rid of that kinetic energy.
Well, I guess, the discussion that I'm trying to get is to move away from that and say, okay, call it whatever you want, call it crash mitigation, great. But let's really try to get to a crash avoidance. When you talk to truckers, the example that they always give you is if I'm a professional driver driving a Class 8 down the New Jersey Turnpike or something like that, and I'm going to pass the truck ahead of me, what I do is I do a right run up behind them and then pass. And probably at some point during the run up, I get within whatever the time to collision metric or whatever that's used in all these things, and I violate that. And unless the system is aware that that is what I'm doing, it's going to apply the brakes. And then, of course, the professional truck driver is going to go nuts, and he's going to take the truck back to the manufacturer and da. But there are some of these situations in which you could have enough intelligence in the system that it knows that this is what you are doing, and so it then operates differently. But it'd be nice to me if we got into the discussion of these things and maybe not do them all, but start doing some of these things. A Tesla 25 miles an hour hitting a tree or hitting a boulder. Come on. I mean, you can't do that one. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry. It just drives me nuts. Talk to me, Steve.
Okay. Well, but so the scenario you mentioned is a good example of why the manufacturers are kind of reluctant to do that, because that's hard to actually understand, to make the distinction between you doing that deliberately as part of a passing maneuver versus you not paying attention and actually being in imminent danger of crashing into that truck. So that's still really hard to understand, and there are lots of people working on it, trying to solve some of those problems, but it's not yet at the point that it's ready for commercial deployment. And this is maybe the case where the concept that Toyota's been working on, called the Guardian, comes in, and that's a system that is trying to do more of that. It's trying to figure out when can it second guess the driver and say, wait a minute, the driver's now not doing something right. It's like you're coming up fast on that other vehicle, and it doesn't seem to be a passing maneuver involved. So we really do need to step on the brakes and prevent you from having that crash. But
or slowing you down or whatever, as opposed to waiting till 1.6 seconds of collision and then all hell breaks loose and whatever, and
right. But how do you do that in a way that doesn't make you, the driver, really angry and said, damn it, you prevented me from doing what I was trying to do? Because there's a very fine line.
This isn't easy. This isn't easy, Steve. Nobody suggested it was easy, right? I mean,
it isn't. It isn't easy. And then think about the challenge. Are you doing the driving, or is your wife doing the driving? And you have two different driving styles. So what's appropriate for you might be different from what's appropriate for your wife to be doing. And it's got to be able to recognize that difference as well. So it's really hard. In a way, it may be harder than doing the automation when the system has the full awareness of everything and is doing all of the control and making all the driving decisions. So,
yeah, I love Toyota's Guardian name of it. That is an appropriate name for such a thing, that in fact it's there to protect us. I might even call it a get out of jail free card or something like that. I've been stupid, I've been misbehaving, and it bails me out. I mean, we need these. I don't know. Maybe you don't need them, but I misbehave in a car, man. I need help. I just help me out here. Guard me. I mean, be my guardian. I mean,
yeah.
But it's been so hard, Steve. Is that the point? It's been so hard that Toyota has not been ready to implement this.
Well, they've been working on it as an R&D project for quite a number of years, and I think coming to the recognition that this may even be harder than doing the automated driving when you're making all the decisions, because of that need to second guess the driver and decide, okay, is this a case where the driver is doing something for a good reason, or is this a case where the driver doesn't have a good reason for doing what they're doing, and we need to step in to prevent them from getting in trouble?
It's fundamentally more difficult, because not only do you have to have a knowledge about the environment around the car, you have to have knowledge about the environment inside the car with the driver. And you basically need to understand that as well as you need to understand both, as opposed to one.
Yeah, so that's what makes it really challenging, and that's why you don't see it on the market yet. And I don't know when you will. And it'll probably start with some limited functionality before it's got more complete functionality. but people are working on this, but it's not easy.
On that note, we'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for a white paper. It's called the Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. You may know that ETFs can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and maybe focus on a particular category of stocks. The website again is motoetf.com. We're back with more of the Smart Driving Cars podcast and our guest, UC Berkeley research engineer Steve Schlatover. Alan, in the latest Smart Driving Cars newsletter, you highlight a piece from Brew headlined, "In a Patch of Arizona, Everyone Knows Waymo, but few use it."
I guess it's continuing my comment. I'm just trying to get them to come to Trenton, where there's a market for all this, where actually people would appreciate it and get value out of the additional mobility. If anybody would come over here and handle it. I guess, my fundamental comments on Chandler, it's a great place to test. Why? Because you really do want to start where it's easier rather than harder, because you can make this thing infinitely difficult, right, Steve? I mean, if you want to deal with all the various things, there's plenty for a lot of folks and a lot of startups to do for many, many years. But let's at least find some places where, in fact, it could deliver some quality of life benefits to some people. And unfortunately, you have Chandler with 70% of the households having 2 or more cars, and Trenton, 70% of the households have 1 or fewer. 1 or fewer is 0. I guess maybe some even have negative cars. It's that bad in Trenton. But it could really, I don't know. That's where I would like to see them, and that's what I'm spending all my time doing, trying to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, as Steve mentioned, they are in San Francisco as well now, at least.
Yeah, as long as they're out there, in the Castro neighborhoods and in the other neighborhoods and they're not just in downtown for the Silicon Valley, whatever's, and people that are on an expense account, whatever. I don't know.
Well, city of San Francisco is expensive enough that just about all the neighborhoods are
poor.
well, people are house poor. But,
yeah.
They are serving some significant portions of the city, but a lot of them are upper income portions of the city because it's still not a cheap service. This is, in fact, there's some indications that maybe they're going to pitch it as more of a premium service rather than an affordable service. We'll see how that develops.
Oh, I don't know. I think that the business case for a premium service is just non-existent in the beginning. I mean, if you stop treating this, I'm now using the circus freak show approach thing of this. If it's not, something, oh my goodness, it's a Disneyland ride. If you sit there and you have to compete with a chauffeur and a limousine, we're not close. I mean, the level of service you have to be able to provide is like unreal. If you have a professional driver in there driving you, and if you think you can do better than that now or even soon, I'm with you, Steve. This is never going to happen. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, and that's actually one of the big challenges with a lot of the push that's been on to have it serve people who have mobility impairments, because there are a lot of challenges associated with helping people get in and out of the vehicles. And if people are in wheelchairs, with securing the wheelchairs and doing all of these other kind of ancillary functions that drivers do right now. And then I've even seen people advocating for having an attendant on board the automated vehicle to provide all of these ancillary services. And well, my reaction to that is, if you need the attendant on board, that should be the driver. Why not just have this as a system that's driven by a driver, and just what they do right now? And that driver helps with getting people in and out of the vehicle forget about trying to do that with an automated vehicle.
Yeah, or I even go further, Steve. If you need an attendant on board for the passenger, and that attendant is also supposed to be driving, and you're having that person do both jobs, you better be paying them double. And you're cheating a little bit, because you probably should have a driver and an attendant. I mean, we know that you shouldn't be on your cell phone and whatever and texting while you're driving and all the other things. I mean, driving, if you're going to have a human driver in there, driving is a full-time job. Okay. And it is a full-time job.
Yeah.
It is a full-time job.
Yeah. Alan,
yeah.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say a lot of these challenges are, I think, what's motivating more of the attention on the package delivery as opposed to people movement for the early applications in urban areas. And there's some good reasons for the package delivery application being attractive. Because packages don't get impatient if the vehicle is deferential to other traffic participants. And if the vehicle drives really cautiously, package doesn't care. If you're going to get into a dangerous situation, the vehicle can really prioritize protection of the other road users because it doesn't have a person on board that it needs to protect. If the package gets banged up, big deal. As opposed to the person inside the vehicle getting banged up. So considerations like that actually make the package delivery application a little bit less challenging than the people moving application.
And Steve, what I throw on top of that is between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., there's nobody on the roads. And unless, I need it right this second, 20 minutes, whatever, half of the stuff that at least half of the stuff that Amazon delivers is delivered just fine, thank you, the next morning. And my goodness, Amazon has to be working on this. They have to be doing it inside. They have to, how much of their balance sheet right now is associated with getting stuff to my house, and they don't have to tell us about it. I don't know if you know anything. I if I knew anything inside, I wouldn't say it anyway, but I don't even ask, but they have to be working on it. It's very much in their interest.
Right. Yeah, I assume they must be, and I assume it had to be part of the motivation for acquiring Zoox as well. But although they claim not, but
but they don't have to tell us, right? Because it's for their business. It's internal. They don't, and as soon as they get it to a point where they think they can do it, then they'll raise their hand and say, hey, yo, Steve, Alan, we're doing this. NHTSA, watch out, and whatever, and they'll do it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive here.
Another headline, Alan, a new estimate from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration indicates that a surge in road deaths that we've talked about over and over that began with the pandemic has continued into this year.
Yeah, it's a 25% increase, for that quarter over what it was sort of pre COVID, and as opposed to, one fatality per whatever it is, 100 million vehicle miles or whatever that number is, it's up to 1.26. And it's, I don't know what your experience, Steve, is driving, but it's, I always take my 9 above the speed limit, but people are done. They're taking 19 now, if not 24. And it's like crazy out there, and everybody has their phones in their face, and what are you going to do?
I don't know whether they've done the studies yet to try to figure out what's causing that effect, why it's been so bad. But certainly I've noticed when I'm on freeways in the Bay Area that I can be out there at times a day that in the past would have been super congested, and they're not as congested now. So the traffic is moving at higher speeds than it did previously. Maybe that's some of what's behind this.
Yes, we need to do the studies, but I think we all sort of kind of understand what's going on. People are just, I don't know. Maybe we really do need some technology to keep us from misbehaving as we're out there doing this stuff, having the phones in our face, going at speeds that, what the hell? I mean, cut it out, and tailgating and whatever. Anyway.
But I think the challenge in that is that the people who most need it, the ones who are most prone to misbehave, are probably the least likely to decide they want to have it on their vehicles.
And they have the snips to go off.
Yeah.
And if they can't figure it out themselves, they just go to the inner tubes, and the inner tubes tell them exactly what to do. And there are 18 YouTube videos that, of course, nobody will ever take down until. Never mind. We don't want to go there. I'm too cynical for that stuff. Sorry, Steve.
Well, you were cynical about this next one too, Alan. Toyota has paused its self-driving shuttle service in Tokyo's Olympic Village after a vehicle collided with a visually impaired athlete. Apparently, it was under the control of a human operator, though.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, again, we're still in this test phase business, and every one of these crashes just gives another black eye to the technology, and to be out there doing some of this stuff. Maybe we shouldn't be out there yet, or something. I don't know. This is a really tough problem, Steve. You've been saying it for a long time. You're the leader in saying it's a really tough problem. I've sort of been a little bit more flamboyant, but it is a really tough problem.
Yeah,
Steve,
and it's a tough problem when you've got some, I guess I'd say, some ambiguity about what's the role of that person and what's the role of the technology on the vehicle. And I think I saw a report that the Toyota had restarted that service for the Paralympics, but with some procedural modifications.
Well, I think this was during the Paralympics, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was during the Paralympics, and of course they don't have a steering wheel in there, and they have somebody with a joystick, basically running it by themselves, and who cares? I mean, the fault is probably with the implementation of the joystick. Operational mode has nothing to do with any of the technology that's really on there to do driverless, and it's just whatever. It's unfortunate.
Well, this is in your neck of the woods, Steve. Motional has announced that it will deploy a test fleet of Hyundai electric vehicles equipped with robotaxi technology in LA.
Okay, that's one I had not heard about, and I guess is that something still it has to be on a testing basis.
It's on a testing base,
fleet,
and it's to do. It's not doing. It will do. It's still. I don't know. They must be trying to raise some money. Never mind. I shouldn't have said that, but whatever. I did say it.
Yeah, I've given up on paying attention to all the announcements of what people will do. It's only worth paying attention to what they have done.
Right.
Because, now we've passed the year 2000, and look back at all of the announcements around 2015. I'm sorry, we passed 2020. Look at the announcements from 2015 and 2016 of all of the great things that were going to happen by 2020. Well, now that 2020 is behind us, we see that none of that stuff actually happened.
The gonna stuff, you just have to roll your eyes on. And what's bothering me even more lately is you look at some of the doer stuff and the videos some people put out, and you look at them closely and you say, what? Where's the smoke? Where's the mirrors? Where's the photoshopping? And it just drives you nuts. I mean, come on, we've all have to be honest about what it is we're actually doing, and what it is we'd still like to do, and what it is that we can't do. And let's bring some real honesty to this stuff, because I don't think the investors are buying that stuff anymore. Although we'll wait and see. But
well, I think that has changed within the last couple of years. The investors were buying it until a couple of years ago. And I think now they've started to recognize this is a lot of steps on a very long path, and they're going to have a lot of patience. They're not going to see a return on investment in the next couple of years. So it's only investors with a lot of patience who are going into it at this stage.
Yeah, the way I am still personally, I still think that there's enormous fundamental opportunities here, but you've got to be able to do it, and do it every day. or maybe 350 out of the 365. The hell with the other 15. As I told my students, I mean, if you do so well 350 days a year, you deserve 2 weeks vacation. Okay, when the damn Ida or whatever hits Jersey, cool, stay home. Okay, you don't have to go out and automatically take me.
Right.
I don't know.
There's a big opportunity out there, just as there is with, say, thermonuclear fusion for power generation, but it's a long road to get there.
Yeah, talk about the thermo guys. I mean, they've been saying, "Oh man, we're trying to just be able to contain this plasma so that we generate as much energy as we put into it." What they fail to tell you is that's the energy directly into the plasma and the energy directly out. It doesn't talk about how you took the electricity and converted it to that energy, or how you took this energy out and converted it to a usable electricity, because holy hell, you need a 10-to-1 ratio before you're out ahead of that curve. Never, yeah. Sorry. Yes.
I'm learning something new every day. One more story that I wanted to throw in, Alan, because I knew how you would react to this. Audi has introduced a Grand Sphere concept electric sedan that Engadget says uses level 4 full self-driving to help you avoid driving whenever possible, calling it a luxurious living room that just happens to let you take the wheel.
Right. Well, if it just, I don't know, calling it, I hate the levels anyway. Calling it level 4 is, come on. I mean, level 4, at least as I always understood, it took you from A to B, whatever the A and B was, and did that safely without you intervening. Okay. Now, I guess you could take it, middle of the milepost 28 on the New Jersey Turnpike to the middle of milepost 32 on the New Jersey Turnpike, but I don't know.
This sounds like a concept car rather than something
It is
real.
Yes, exactly. I think they unveiled this at the IFA conference in Europe.
Okay. Well, but GM had concept cars back in the 1950s that were going to do all of this too. So
we've seen those videos, right?
Yeah, but a lot of these, I'm thinking, what was it, the Faraday Future at CES about 5 years ago? It was basically a plastic sculpture.
Well, Stephen, we want to thank you for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it. Great insight.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for inviting me. It was a fun discussion.
And thank you for coming on, Steve. Really, I think there is still value in the concept, but it is still a heck of a lot of work, and it needs a lot of innovation, needs a lot of good people, and needs a lot of honesty in it too.
Thank you as well to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO. You can get more information at motoetf.com. You can find us once again at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you turn to for podcasts. You can get your smart speaker to play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching. Have a great Labor Day weekend, and please stay safe.
And thank you, Steve, again. Wonderful having you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks.